Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode. My name is Mohammad Reza Fati, and I'm a life coach. What we do in life echoes in eternity. This episode is about an interesting subject called overthinking. There is this quiet habit that looks intelligent from the outside. It sounds responsible, it feels careful, or even it disguises itself as maturity. But on the inside, it's just suffering. It's called overthinking. It's not reflection, it's not thoughtful planning, and neither it is deep philosophical curiosity. Overthinking is when thought stops helping you and starts draining you. It's when the mind keeps solving a problem that has already been solved or analyzing a future that hasn't arrived yet or recalling a moment over and over again. Psychologist Susan Nolan, known for her work on overthinking, showed that repetitive thinking does not increase clarity, it increases emotional distress. In her book, Women Who Think Too Much, she explains something uncomfortable. Overthinking feels productive, but it rarely leads to decisive action. That illusion of productivity is what makes it dangerous because you think you're doing something. Because overthinking does not look like avoidance, it looks like effort. You think you're doing something. And that's where the trap begins. Picture something simple, a message being sent, and 2 hours go by, no reply yet. At first, everything feels natural. Then the internal commentary begins. Did I do something wrong? Did I write it in the bad way? Perhaps the tone was off. Maybe they're upset, or maybe they're starting to pull away. The message gets reread. Words are mentally rearranged. Alternative versions replay in the imagination. Meanwhile, the other person is simply in a meeting, or he's just asleep. This is one of the most common reactions to uncertainty, mental simulation. The brain dislikes incomplete information. In psychology, this discomfort is often linked to what researchers call intolerance of uncertainty. The mind would rather invent a painful explanation than sit while not knowing. Here's what quietly happens in the body. The nervous system reacts to imagined reaction as if it were real. Slight tightness forms in the chest. Breathing becomes shallower, and the phone gets checked again. By the time the reply arrives and he says, "Sorry, I just saw this," but your energy has already been spent on preparing for rejection. The consequence is subtle, but cumulate. The consequence is subtle but cumulative. Ongoing stress from imagined threats. And imagined stress still produces real cortisol. So, what can shift? A client of mine, Maya, tried something small. Whenever she caught herself rereading a sent message, she wrote one sentence on a sticky note to herself. Delay is not data. That one line interrupted the spiral. Instead of checking her phone repeatedly, she set a timer for 1 hour and placed the phone in another room. The first few attempts felt uncomfortable. The mind kept insisting. But what if this time it's different? Rather than arguing back, she labeled the thought prediction, not fact. Within weeks, something softened. Silence no longer felt like a verdict. It was simply silence. And that small shift brings us to a deeper pattern beneath overthinking, the need for control. Because underneath most overthinking lies the belief that if we think long enough, we can prevent pain. That belief becomes especially visible when big decisions appear. Imagine a new job offer in another city, maybe Austin, maybe Toronto, or maybe Melbourne. better salary, new environment, some adventure. At first, a pros and cons list gets drafted, then another one. Soon, you find yourself reading about housing trends. Cost of living comparisons follow. Career trajectory projections fill the mind. Eventually, thinking crosses a line. Clarity is no longer the goal, thinking is. Eliminating risk becomes the mission. Author Oliver Berkman writes in 4,000 Weeks that the attempt to optimize every life decision is often a refusal to accept limits, choosing one path and letting go of another. Overthinking, in this case, is really about avoiding loss. On the surface, it sounds like desire for the perfect choice, but underneath, there is a quieter fear. What if I regret this? Here's how it unfolds. Weeks pass, the offer expires, and the current job starts to feel heavier. Then a new layer forms, self doubt. Maybe I can't even make decisions. Overthinking slowly weakens self trust. Even delayed choice becomes a quiet evidence against oneself. So, how can someone respond without becoming impulsive? Another client of mine in Seattle faced this exact situation. Instead of asking, "What is the perfect decision?" he reframed it. Which uncertainty am I more willing to live with? Not which job is safer, not which city is objectively better. Which unknown aligns more closely with who am I trying to become? He gave himself a deadline, like 10 days. Research was allowed, but only during a 45-minute window each evening. Analysis tried to spill into the rest of the day. He wrote the thought down and returned to it later. Structure replaced endless wandering. He accepted the new job not because it was guaranteed, but because he stopped demanding guarantees. And once control loosens its grip on decision making, another layer becomes visible: perfectionism. Perfectionism rarely arrives loudly. More often, it speaks softly. A blank document is open. There is a desire to create something meaningful. A paragraph appears on the screen. Then it disappears. Sentences get adjusted repeatedly. As hours pass, nothing feels good enough. Perfectionistic overthinking hides behind the language of high standards. But real high standards produce finished works, while overthinking just produces delay. Researcher Brown often says perfectionism is not the same thing as striving for excellence. Perfectionism is a shield against criticism, against vulnerability, against exposure, and the result is stagnation. Projects remain unfinished, ideas stay private. Creative energy turns inward and becomes self criticism. I worked with a content creator in Los Angeles who had drafted 27 video scripts and published none. Each time she approached the upload button, fresh doubts appeared. What if it sounds amateur? What if people question my credibility? Instead of trying to eliminate the fear, we created one rule: publish at 80%. Not because 80% is perfect, but because momentum builds confidence faster than endless editing. The first upload felt uncomfortable. By the third, the tension was lower. By the 10th, the process felt natural. Fear didn't disappear before action. It shrank because of action. And when action replaces endless refining, another hidden pattern becomes visible: overthinking as emotional avoidance. At times, overthinking has nothing to do with performance or decisions. It revolves around pain. A breakup conversation gets replayed again and again, not to gain insight, but to feel a sense of control. Tone is analyzed, word choice discussed, and moments gets analyzed very carefully. You see, that relationship is ended, yet the mind keeps negotiating. Dr. Frankl once wrote, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Overthinking resists that challenge because as long as analysis continues, direct grief can be postponed. But the thing is, unprocessed sadness does not disappear. It turns into anxiety. A businessman in Texas told me he spent 6 months analyzing why his partner left. At one point, I asked him, if analysis stopped, what feeling would remain? He paused for a moment. Then he replied, sadness, the kind that sits heavily in the chest. So we tried something different. For 20 minutes, there was no storytelling, no reconstructing the past, just sitting with the sensation. You were left alone. Just breathe, allow it to be. It felt raw at the moment, but gradually the mental loop got weakened because when the mind refuses to feel, it continues to think. And when thinking becomes a substitute for feeling, identity slowly begins to shift. Over time, self description starts to change. I'm just an anxious person. I'm terrible at decisions. My brain never shuts off. Notice how fixed those statements are? Overthinking shifts from behavior to identity, and identity level behaviors are harder to unwind. Psychologist Ethan Kross explains in Chatter that psychological distance can quiet mental noise. One technique he describes is self distant language, speaking to yourself the way you would speak to a friend. Instead of, why am I like this? Why do I behave like this? The question becomes, what would I tell someone I care about in this situation? A university student in Vancouver tried this before exams. Rather than criticizing himself, rather than saying, if I fail, my future is ruined, she wrote advice to herself in third person. Okay, you're anxious because this matters. Study for 2 focused hours and then stop. This was the advice she told herself. The shift wasn't dramatic, but it was steady, it was acceptable. She was no longer trapped inside that thought, she was observing it. And observation reduces identification. When stepping back, a pattern becomes clear. Overthinking promises safety, but delivers fatigue. It promises control, but weakens trust. It promises certainty, but it increases doubt. The alternative isn't thinking more, it's structural thinking. And for the final part, I'm going to teach you one technique that helps you reduce your overthinking. Instead of thinking about subjects like raw thinking, you should try this. Grab a piece of paper and write down 6 things that actually matter to you in your financial situation, about your parents, one about your kids, one about your friends, one about your partner. 6 very important issues that really matter to you right now. And just think about them. Why do you think about issues that don't matter so much? Past is past, future is not here yet. Even if you want to prepare for the future, you should do something now and you should analyze it, you should plan for it. So, actually bringing your thoughts down on a paper reduces overthinking to thinking about a solvable problem. These are 2 different things. Overthinking is killing you. Thinking about things that matter is actually helping you. And how does this work? Spend 15 minutes a day to thinking and leave the rest to present moment. When you eat, just eat. When you drink, just drink. When you work, just do the work. And during that 15 minutes, think about anything that you want. Don't think while you're driving. Don't think while you're eating. Just stop that overthinking. What we do in life echoes in eternity.